Hello, Packers fans, and welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Pete Dougherty. Pete, thank you for being with me again today. This is the second time I've had you this week.
Yeah, this a lot of fun. There's finally a football game this weekend without all this other crazy stuff surrounding it.
All the hoopla.
Yeah,
Thank you for. I paid him $5 to say that this was fun to do with me. So good. What money well spent. Thank you for
I
doing
thought
that.
it was 10.
Your people need to speak to my people. Those were not the
Okay,
terms I agreed to.
okay.
Anyways, like you said, yes, we do have a game this weekend without near as much off the field drama, supposedly, hopefully, surrounding it. Packers take on Seahawks in what could become a pretty important game when you look at the playoff picture. So let's just start there before we get into everything else. Before we get into the people, how important is this game just in terms of what the Packers will want to do or where they want to be sitting when it comes postseason time?
Yeah, it's big for two reasons. Just because every game matters for notching them in the win column rather than loss column, and it's an NFC game. So when you're determining the seeding between, let's say it's between the Packers and a team from outside their division, trying to remember if I can't remember if conference games are first or common opponents are first. Um, but either way, this could matter a lot for that because let's say it's the Rams. The Rams play in the same division as the Seahawks, so they'll have
Mm-hmm.
played the Seahawks twice. So, and long story short, it's big for a tiebreaker also.
Yeah, we've already got a comment from the audience saying, quite simply, run the ball. So let's start there. How important will running the ball be, no matter who's under center this weekend, in what could apparently become a pretty wet game?
Yeah, huge. If Rodgers doesn't play and loves the quarterback, then it's huge. But really, I think for the rest of the season, even with Rodgers, running the ball is a pretty important part of the offense for the Packers. They lost Robert Tunyon for the season. He was a good weapon at tight end. His numbers weren't
Mm-hmm.
great this year, but they were going to spike because he was a good player and he had a really good training camp, and he was eventually, going to get the ball more.
Mm-hmm.
And so they lost him. So that's a pretty good weapon in the passing game. So I think they'll have to lean on the run even a little bit more than they already did. And they have one of the best running back duos in the league. I think the other teams up there would be Cleveland and Dallas for best running back duos. But I would think the Packers would feel just as good about Jones and Dillon as the Cowboys do about their two guys and the Browns do about their two guys.
Mm-hmm. We do have a question that I think we got yesterday, and I just forgot to address. I know a couple of people have asked this, so we'll answer it again as to where is Olivia? Obviously, I'm not Olivia. Olivia got a dream job back home in Philadelphia covering the Flyers, just one of those jobs you don't turn down. And so we are excited for her, and I'm happy to be here and to fill in some pretty big shoes. Speaking of filling in some pretty big shoes, if if it is Love again, we talked to him again today. Um, he said that he's still preparing, he's still practicing like he could be the starter because they don't know yet if it will be him or Aaron Rodgers. Um, if you're Matt LaFleur, do you prepare for this game differently after seeing what Love did on Sunday versus the Chiefs? Do you prepare for this? Do you have two different game plans? I guess is what I'm asking heading into this game.
I would think so. That just the experience level and command of the game and of the offense and of defenses and all of that, it's just night and day. It's the two extremes between Rodgers and Love. So that alone's got to change the way you do it. And I saw somebody here referenced about the carries for Dylan, and he only had 8. I think he and Jones combined only had 20 last week, and I think they threw the ball 30 sometimes. With Love's your quarterback, you want that flipped. With Rodgers, that's okay. He's just so good, so in command of what he's doing. He may have changed runs to passes and gone to some pretty easy passes and pick up some easy yardage. So yeah, I would think there would definitely, if I'm LaFleur, I have two different sets of play calls that I would be leaning more on, depending on who the quarterback is. And like you said, it's sure. Everything's pointing to that. Rodgers will be cleared and he'll be the guy Sunday.
We were out at practice today. It was another cold, wet, rainy day in Green Bay, and saw Eric Stokes, who was listed as questionable on the injury report. Sorry, that's not supposed to do that. He was listed as questionable on the injury report, and that he was out at practice today as a full participant. If we don't see him on Sunday, that could make a big difference just in terms of who's matched up against who, especially when you look at Seattle's wide receiver unit with both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. There's Eric Stokes right there. Jordan Love getting some work in as well. But of course, the most glaring absence at practice today was David Bakhtiari. He was not there, and he is now listed as doubtful for Saturday. Here is what Matt LaFleur had to say about that today.
Matt, what does tomorrow look like for you? Is it any different than what your normal Saturday is, or you have to do work as Aaron is not back here yet?
No, well, we're going to treat it pretty much the same. We've had a lot of conversations with Aaron in that regard as to what he needs to be ready to go. And again, he's a guy that's it wouldn't be the first time in his career that he hadn't practiced an entire week and gone out and played a game. So as long as he's confident with what we're doing with him, then we'll see where he's at tomorrow.
And my apologies, that was not the quote that I thought it was going to be. That was, of course, actually Matt LaFleur talking about Aaron Rodgers. And kind of going into what we were saying, do you have two different game plans? Because you don't really know what's going to happen still. He has to be cleared. He does not have to test negative like we thought he did. He just has to have shown no symptoms and shown no fever for 24 hours. But the guy on the other sideline, Russell Wilson, will be returning after a couple weeks with a finger injury. I think someone in here at some point mentioned, the game that Russell Wilson played a couple of years ago, the playoff game, where he kind of just took the whole team on his back. If you're the Packers, what do you do to kind of slow this guy down, especially if you don't have Eric Stokes out there?
Yeah, well, and speaking of Stokes, so I don't know this for a fact, but the smart money says, because I think he was a limited participant Wednesday and Thursday, and then a full participant Friday.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the reason they're listing him as questionable is they just don't know after a full practice and doing everything that he'd normally do, how his knee will react and how it'll feel tomorrow. But the fact that he was a full participant today and they were able to ramp it up to that level suggests the odds are pretty good of him playing on Sunday. I think it's being cautious because they don't know if he might have some issues when he wakes up tomorrow morning, for instance. And Bakhtiari, I thought this would be the week he'd be back after he didn't play last week. But then when he was only a limited participant on Wednesday, that was a big red flag that they're still just ramping him up. I would guess that he won't play until he gets a full week where he's a full participant every day in practice. I would think that would be – I think there's a pretty good chance that would be the barrier he'd have to cross. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it'll be next week or a few weeks from now. Russell Wilson did play a really good – he brought that Seahawks team back in the playoffs last year basically by himself. I mean, he just started making play after play in the second half. The Packers should be pretty well prepared for this, though, in that they played two mobile quarterbacks, Mahomes and
Kyler Murray.
Arizona and Kyler Murray, in the last couple of weeks. And both of those guys are great training for how you have to rush the quarterback. You got to keep them in the pocket. You've got to be super disciplined about your pass rush lanes. So they've been practicing that for a couple of weeks, plus having to do it on the field on game day. So this is about as prepared as they can be for it. That doesn't mean they'll have a good game, but this is about as prepared as they could be for a guy like Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Levi with a question sort of in that specific to that pass rush. Said Smith seems to love this guy. Can you get home with 4 with this Packers pass rush? with a mobile quarterback like Wilson back there, it doesn't seem possible. But then at the same time, if he's extending plays, you've got to have some help on the back end, correct? I mean, how do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, just watching this league for the last few years, I think you're better off making a guy like him have time and beat you from the pocket rather than get out and make those huge plays.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can't give him all day because he's an good NFL quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been doing okay at getting home with 4. I mean, Rashawn Gary's he keeps improving as the season goes on. If Kenny Clark plays, he's questionable, but he's a good inside rusher. Lowry's given a little bit of inside rush. Preston Smith is having a solid season. So they can get okay pressure with 4. I think this is where getting Zadarius Smith back will be really big for him if he can return in December for him.
Speaking of Zadarius Smith, someone mentioned this, and I noticed it last night on his social media. He does seem to be back in Green Bay. How good of a sign is that just for the timeline of when you could get him back?
Yeah, it means, he's done the majority of his rehab, the hardest part of it, the early part, wherever he went to do that. And now he's starting to get ready to play football. And all the signs were everything, I kind of heard just, grapevine stuff was that they were thinking he could be back sometime in December. So, sometime in the next 5 weeks or so, maybe he's got a shot at getting back on the field. But yeah, the fact that he's, able to go out to practice and watch it now, that's a lot farther along than he was 6 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Got a question here from Steve that I'm not really sure what prompted it, but it was nice enough that I wanted to bring it up. Will the jet motion return to the offense? I've spent the last few years covering college where the jet motion is still alive and well. But Pete, you know this team better than I do. Is that something that they need, another trick in their bag?
Well, it was a huge part of the offense the last 2 years,
mm-hmm.
and it's kind of been non-existent. They run the motion some. They hardly ever hand. I mean, they don't even when they were running it a lot, they'd only hand it off maybe twice a game. But I can only think of a couple times where they've actually handed the ball off on the jet motion this year, and I'm wondering the same thing. Murray Rogers, I thought, would have a big role doing
mm-hmm.
that stuff, but he can't get on the field. He's hardly playing. So maybe that's the biggest reason why is they don't have anybody else who they really like as a threat in the jet sweep role. So maybe his just not being ready to play is the biggest reason they're not using that jet motion. But I wonder the same thing.
We'll get to Amari Rogers here in just a minute too, with a wrap up on special teams. But does that surprise you at all that it has been absent from this offense, especially when you consider that LaFleur's offense sort of grew out of that Shanahan tree? And I remember reading a story a few months ago about how Kyle Shanahan sat in on a defensive meeting when he was very young and realized that every time someone moves on the offensive side of the ball, the ripple effect that creates on defense, which is why he goes with so much motion. He brought it to his dad. That was sort of implemented. So does that surprise you that this is not as prevalent in LaFleur's offense?
It does. Now, maybe they're trying to, make up for that by just motioning players, but not using the jet sweep motion. But the thing I liked about the jet sweep motion, besides what you point out about with Shanahan, is it stretches the defense horizontally, because a lot of those jet motions, you'd run the jet motion with the guy going one way, and then you could run an inside zone, outside zone, or toss the other way. So you were kind of stretching the defense out and making the backside of the defense stay home because of the threat of the jet sweep. But we're half a season in, so I don't know. Maybe it's something he's kept in the back pocket, and we're going to see more of it. Or maybe he just doesn't. He thinks defenses have adjusted to it, or maybe it's because Amari Rogers isn't getting on the field and he's their only guy who can do it.
Yeah, and to your point, you do have to have someone that is fast, that is shifty, and that is good in space to be able to run that and run it well. And maybe they don't have that outside of Amari Rogers. Speaking of Amari Rogers, he was a huge point of I don't want to use the word contention, discussion this week in terms of what the Packers do on special teams. I feel like we've discussed this every way to Sunday, but just we're almost to Sunday Do you roll with him still back there and just hope he figures it out? Do you stick Randall Cobb back there and say just make everything a fair catch? Because it would seem like it would be too late in the season at this point to bring in a new punt returner, correct?
They're Cassie. They're not in a good spot there at all. They're in a bad spot kickoff return too because of Hill's knee injury. They don't have anybody who's nearly the threat he is. So their return game is just back to as bad as it was last year or a couple of years ago. So I'm not sure. It sure sounds like they're Drayton, their special teams coach, Mo Drayton.
Mm-hmm.
He'd prefer to stay with Murray Rogers, and at least he is a threat to return the ball where Cobb, wouldn't be much of one. But you can't have special teams losing you games. You just cannot have that. The first rule of special teams is the old physician's oath: first, do no harm. And, and they've been doing some harm. So, you get the feeling Drayton's going to want Amari Rogers back there, but you never know. And I'm sure he's one muff punt away from, it being Cobb and just, like, as you said, fair catch and everything.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me third time, it's Randall Cobb time.
There you go.
Okay, Steve asked, assuming that Valdez-Scantling is 100%, is it time to test the Seahawks secondary with the deep ball? The Seahawks did list both corner Bless Austin, what a great name, and safety Marquise Blair as officially out. Does that change anything in reference to Valdez-Scantling?
I would say the answer to Steve's question is yes.
Good answer.
Yeah. I mean, to keep it simple, yeah, they need, they've missed his ability to stretch defenses, and the way to do it is have him running a fair amount of deep routes and go routes, and you got to throw it every once in a while. So yeah, I would have to think that's definitely part of the game plan.
And then when do we find out tomorrow if Aaron Rodgers is playing? Pete, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure of an exact time. I guess it might just depend on when the doctor can talk to him, correct?
Yeah, and I don't know what time they have to turn in. During the week, I think the waiver wire goes out at 3 p.m. Central Time, or not the waiver wire, the transaction wire at 3 p.m. Central Time.
Right.
So I don't know if that's also the time on Saturday. And with it being this big a player, I would guess the news will get out really fast once it happens. Mm-hmm. But no, I don't know what time it'll be. It'll just be sometime, tomorrow.
You have to, if you're activating someone, it has to be done by 4 p.m. Is that correct?
I think it's 4 p.m. I'm pretty sure it's 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central.
Okay.
Not positive on that, but I think that's what it is.
And so I guess we're assuming he would fall under that same category because he would have to, quote unquote, be activated because he's currently on the reserve COVID-19 list, correct?
Right. And
okay.
Either his agent or somebody with the Packers is going to tell a national reporter, that he's active. I'm sure sometime before that, before that deadline hits, that'd be big enough news where that's going to leak out somehow or other.
Yeah. So keep up with us at Packers News for that. It will be an interesting afternoon, I'm sure. Not a quiet Saturday before a home game. Pete, I know you're a busy man, so we won't keep you much longer. Last question here from Tyler, sort of an introspective one. Sitting here, week 10, is this Packers team better than last year at this point in the season?
What a good question, and something I'm kind of working on where they are halfway through the year, and we'll probably allude to this in one way or another in the column that I'm writing for tomorrow. And there's not a straight, easy answer, but their offense is not as good as it was last year, not as dynamic. But their defense, it's looking like it's quite a bit better, and they're going to get back two of their star players probably in December with Zadarius Smith and Jair Alexander. So there's an argument that this team is better overall, even though the offense isn't quite as good. I actually tend to kind of lean that way, and they do have the two running backs. They don't, as good as Jamal Williams was to have on your team and all that, he's just not the threat with the ball in his hands that A.J. Dillon is. So they've always got a threat defenses have to worry about at running back on the field this year. So if I just, really had to say and make a bet, I would say, yeah, I think they might be just a little better overall this year than they were last year, based mostly on that it looks like their defense is, quite a bit better.
And then, of course, they'll possibly get both Aaron Rodgers and David Bakhtiari back here soon. Stick with us at PackersNews.com for complete coverage as Aaron Rodgers possibly most likely returns this weekend and the Packers get ready to take on the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday. Thanks so much, Pete. Thanks, everyone, for listening.